Hi there, and welcome to Flip the Script Season 3 In the Weeds, Episode 15, the only 3 things that matter within cold outreach to get a response from your prospect. My name is Becc. I'm going to be your guide for this session. If you do me a favor, if you'd go to flipthescript.co first, I'm not going to ask you to subscribe to anything, all right? If on the left-hand side, if you click Free Sales Training Hub, and click Season 3, Episode 15, and download the deck so you can have it in front of you at each step of the way. So it's free. All you'll have to do is put in an email. And once you've done that, let's go ahead and jump into the content. So this is the agenda for today. The first thing, so full disclosure, there are 3 things that matter when it comes to outreach. The first one is, do they read it? The second one is, do you psychologically take care of them along the way? And then number 3, are you relevant to them once they do read it? So we're going to cover all 3 of those items. And then immediately following that item, we're going to go into how to get them to read it, things to consider and avoid to take care of them psychologically along the way, and then the top 6 ways to drive relevance. So it's more of the how can you get them to do this more for the 3 things that are important. So let's go into the first thing. So the first and most important thing I would argue is, do they read it? For instance, over email. So this is a new problem within the industry. You know, before we had the beauty and wonderful enablement of a sales engagement tool, selling back 50 years ago, or even just 20, 25 years ago, essentially was I, as the seller, drive to someone's office, knock on their door, and ask them, if I can give them my pitch. So it didn't introduce any other problem other than, am I relevant to the person once I am talking to them? But because of today's day and age, most people are communicating over email. So most prospects actually, via industry statistics today, prefer that you contact them primarily over email. So email is also one of the most crowded chains. It's one of the most crowded channels that you can outreach to someone on. So the first question is, how do I stand out from the other 200 people who are sending similar types of emails? So with any kind of introduction of a wonderful tool like that, we're going to introduce another set of problems. And some of those problems come around now that people can get send out multitude of emails per day. They are. So people are getting more emails than ever before. So the first question I usually ask people is, when you log into your email on Monday, what's the first thing that you do? Usually what I hear is people start deleting things, and they say that they delete all the junk, or at least that's what I do. And so then I usually ask people, okay, do you open every email that you delete? And they usually say, no, I don't. And I'm like, well, how do you know you could have deleted it? And they're like, well, I just know. I'm like, no, based on what? And the reality is that there are a certain amount of criteria that we're thinking through. So from now on, and I'm not going to be too bullish here. I hope that I'm not here to add no value. But the smartest thing that you can do, and the best thing you can do for your prospecting, is not necessarily to no call here, but not necessarily to listen to me or listen to a webinar. It is to think like a buyer. From now on, think exactly how you are as a buyer. When you lie to someone or tell them you were running into a meeting and you weren't, why did you do that? What did you really want instead? Why did you say you're running into a meeting then? Or when you scour through your email and you delete emails, why did you delete the emails? What emails did you delete? Which ones did you delete but you didn't even open? So I'd start to think of get very introspective of all of your buying behavior, and it'll help you understand your buyers more than ever before. So the pattern of a typical sales email that people are going to delete, usually people are going to log into an email and they are looking for, Google did a study on how you read emails on desktop, and you start at 2 o'clock and go clockwise. So essentially people want to know who you are, the end of your first line first, and then the end of your last line next, and then the middle copy. So they want to know who you are and what you want before they want to know anything about your value prop. So if they log in and they see any kind of common sales language, it doesn't matter if it's a quote unquote valuable salesperson or not. Usually what they're wondering is this a salesperson? So if you look like a salesperson at the beginning of that email or in the subject line, you have a much, 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 much lower rate of conversion and likelihood of someone actually paying attention to the email. So your body is designed from a threat perspective to identify things that don't look normal to the pattern that they are used to. So you can't absorb all the stimulus at once. So essentially when you're walking down the street, you want to look or your body naturally looks for things or triggers based on things that don't look normal, quote unquote normal. So normal for a sales email is going to be around the following. The first line is going to be usually a name. The reason for my outreach is my name is blank and I'm with blank and we do blank. The second line is usually going to be a value prop. We're the number one blank provider and we work with blank to help them do blank. The third line is going to be some type of social proof. We've worked with companies like LinkedIn and Spotify to help them drive yada, yada, yada. The fourth line is going to be the CTA or call to action. I'd love to jump on a quick call for 15 minutes and chat about it. An assumptive close. Looking forward to hearing back from you. Ooh, I hate assumptive closes. And all the best. Best regards. Cheers. And then the rep name. Commonly used phrases. Happy Monday. Hope you and your kids are safe during these uncertain times. Just checking in. Just bubbling this to the top of your inbox. Just wanted to circle back. Just wanted to follow up. Hope you had a great weekend. I'd love to. Looking forward to. These are all very, very common phrases within sales. So the problem with these is, again, the first thing that you are combating as a prospector, whether that's AE or SDR, is do they read it? So the more terms like this that you're hitting and structuring the email like this, the more you look completely identical to the other 200 on average emails that they are getting from sellers per day. So if it looks and smells exactly like the rest of these emails, their brain is going to be designed to log out of it, even if they do open it and click delete. So the more that you can interrupt this pattern, it's not necessarily that these are bad words, but these are words that everyone's using. So it's going to be extremely hard for you to stand out on value prop alone, the more of these words that you are using. So very, very big sin here. So a great option to ensure that they do read it. And there's a number of different ways that you can do this. I've seen a lot of quote unquote gimmicks of you're saying something that's kind of different, like the rule of three of like, you either must be blank, blank, or blank. A good fail-safe that I have seen work time and time and time again, not only work from the perspective of they read it, but that they respond and that their mindset's in the right place, is personalization. So personalization, people wonder why I've been such an advocate of it at personalization at scale. It's because of the results that I've seen. So personalization, the reason that it increases the likelihood that people read it, number one, you're going to trigger dopamine within their brain. So you have 200 neurotransmitters in your brain. Typically, anatomically speaking, don't, roast me for this, but anatomically speaking, the drug of choice, so to speak, for a male is usually going to be dopamine. For a female, it's typically going to be serotonin number one and dopamine a close second. Meaning both male and female and everyone in between is a very, very big fan of dopamine. So personalization not only is going to trigger the dopamine in their brain when you mention their name or something they've done, but it also is something that 99.9% repeating of reps are not doing. So when I go to LinkedIn, I take probably a screenshot every time I see it. Every time I see someone mention this is great quality outreach, way to go. I've never seen one post that wasn't inclusive of an email that was personalized. So personalization is defined as anything one-to-one. So if I can send it to my friend Keenan at Gap Selling, and I can also send it, to Mark Benioff, then it is all of a sudden relevance, not personalization. So personalization is anything one-to-one. So there is a number of ways you can do this, but personalization, if nothing else, the reason that I've taken it in the teeth, so to speak, I love the quote in Moneyball. I think it was said to Billy Bean of every first guy through the wall always gets bloody. The first guy through the wall always gets bloody. So point being, the reason I've taken the teeth for that concept is, again, the results that you're going to see on the back end that I've seen with my team. So personalization, if nothing else, put the dopamine trigger aside. It's a fancy pattern interrupt. It's something most people don't do. So the 6 buckets of personalization, I go very in depth in this concept in Personalization Point on the website, if you would like to go there. And I go through personalization at scale, etc. But the 6 buckets of personalization are bucket number 1, self-authored content. Any kind of content that your prospect has authored themselves. Speaking engagements, webinars, articles, posts. Bucket number 2, engaged content. Things that they engage with but didn't author themselves. So commented on, shared, liked comments, or liked posts. By the way, bucket number 1 is you're going to see the most efficacy. And on the higher on the list you are, the more you're going to see efficacy. So as you go lower down the list, you're going to see dropped response rates and booked rates. Personalization bucket 3 is self-identified traits. Anything that they wrote about themselves on LinkedIn. So this is profile line, company line, or headline. Bucket 4 is junk drawer. So this is personal interests, volunteer experience, languages spoken, schools attended, interested in or following. Junk drawer is going to be anything non-business related about them. So you have to hook it. I will give you the asterisk mark that you have to hook it. Again, how to hook personalization relevance is also in Personalization Point if you're interested in seeing a session on it. A personalization bucket number 5 is background centric. So tenure at the company, trajectory between companies, recommendations given, received, anything about their professional background. And then bucket number 6 is company level. So this is going to be the lowest amount of conversion. This is anything about their company in specific. So hypothetically, it's not really personalization because you can send it to multiple people at the org. So it's not a liquid, it's not a solid, it's kind of a gel, so to speak. But this is anything about their company in specific that you could use. So that is how I really would combat the question number 1. Do they read it? As I would personalize. It allows you to be non-gimmicky. It allows you to be non-salesy, so to speak, and focus on them. And it effectively answers the question of a pattern interrupt. So usually what I'm seeing for outbound response rates is going to be sub 1%. These types of emails, including personalization that I advocate for, what I've seen is at minimum, they are getting a 15% response rate, usually upwards of 25% response rate, which is outlandishly high. So I do think the time is worth it, but that is how I'd interrupt pattern number 1. The second question you have to answer is, do you psychologically take care of your prospect along the way? This is a question that is, I'd say question number 1 is never answered within sales methodology or training. It's a new problem. We've introduced it recently with all of our great tech. Question number 2 is rarely, I would say less often asked or answered within sales methodology and training. And this is psychologically, do you take care of your prospect? So I have a couple different pieces of how you can psychologically take care of them. But first off, do you psychologically take care of them by way of what ego state you put them in? So how you can psychologically take care of them, and what I mean by that is not making them have to buy in spite of you because of how you're presenting things. But essentially, I piggyback off of the work of Eric Byrne. He was ahead of his time. He was a psychiatrist back in the 60s, and he wrote a number of different books. One that I would definitely recommend is Games People Play and Beyond Games and Scripts. And what he understood within his research was that people are within one of 3 ego states throughout the day. And this can be triggered by what ego state someone else is in. So I'm going to be very light here in terms of the content, but there are 3 different ego states: parent, adult, and child. Parent is the thoughts and behaviors and feelings that you recognize from your parents or parental figures when you were younger. It has 2 sub-ego states: nurturing and controlling. Nurturing is a compassionate, caring side of your ego state, and it essentially is trying to create a system to take care of the child ego state. And the controlling side of the ego state is the authoritative and disciplinarian side of the parent ego state. And it's creating some type of system to ensure compliance to it so that you are safe in the child ego state. Ridden with emotion will lie to you, and the most often word that the parent ego state will say is no. Child ego state is going to be the thoughts, behaviors, and feelings replayed from your childhood. It is also written with emotion. It will also lie to you. And there are two sub-ego states to this. They're natural and adaptive. So natural is emotional, creative, spontaneous. And the goal of the child ego state for natural is to get the attention of the parent ego state by way of making it happy or having fun. And then the adaptive side of the ego state is the rebellious, insecure side of the child ego state that's also trying to get the attention from the parent ego state, but by way of rebelling, going the opposite direction. But both of these are essentially after getting the attention from the parent ego state. Right in the middle is the adult ego state, and this is a completely emotionless side of your egos or ego state. And this is the ego state that's responding to the here and now. It seeks to plan, observe, analyze, very pragmatic, logical, rational, no emotion to it. And the only goal is not on another ego state, it's to understand. It's on itself. So very, 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 very big difference between being a good parent and being mature and in the adult ego state. They seem like synonyms, but they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, but there's no correlation, essentially. So these are the three ego states. And psychologically, what I mean by you can take care of your prospect is if you are in parent ego state, you're going to shove them into child ego state, and you're going to either, best case scenario, make them feel disempowered, worst case scenario, and feel like they're being placated. Worst case scenario, you're going to shove them into the child adaptive ego state, and essentially they're going to rebel. So a number of different examples of how you can do this. But what I mean by psychologically taking care of them is not being in the parent ego state. So not commanding them to do things, not, asking for, did you get my last email? Did you get my last voicemail? And then you infuse accountability and they start to rebel. They're like, well, it's not my job, or you tell them to let you know something, be there at 3, do not push this button. Shoves them into the child ego state and essentially disempowers them, best case scenario, or makes them want to rebel. Or not being in the child ego state. So child ego state is, correcting them on something, saying that something isn't fair, asking them leading questions, trying to get them to a certain place within discovery, which I see in almost every discovery, that they're leading them somewhere, by the way of the questions that they're asking. It's in the child ego state, triggers them into parent ego state, and so they will say no. So you'll see this in a lot of different objections, that people will say like, oh, I'm not the right person. Someone will rally and they'll say, or the great example within, parent to child is, I want to go to Cindy's house on Friday. Well, you didn't do your homework. Well, I actually did do my homework. Well, you didn't wash your clothes. I actually did wash my clothes. Well, you're mean to your brother. I actually wasn't mean to my brother. And they're like, just no. They start flexing objections because they're in the wrong ego state. Your prospects will do the same thing. I'm not the right person. Well, you actually are the right person. Well, we're already using someone else. We don't compete with them. And they just hang up the phone. They're in the wrong ego state. So I would try to be an adult as much as you can. So I put a number of different examples. I'm not going to go into them now, of when you're in parent ego state, give me a call. Did you see my last email? Parent nurturing, saying that you're thankful for someone's patience when they've been waiting on the line for 45 minutes. Verizon, just kidding. I love Verizon. But seriously, it's a long wait. Saying that saying sorry for something negative that you did without actually making a move to fix it or remedy it. And then child ego state, here's some examples here. But the goal here, what I mean first and foremost by psychologically taking care of them, is being within the adult ego state. So it is hallmarked by always wanting to understand, not to blame, not to accuse, not to criticize, not to correct, not to command, not to, belittle, but trying to understand. And it has no emotion and it cannot lie. So there's a great hallmark. So anytime that you're lying, you are not in the adult ego state. So the average statistic is that we have 12,000 to 16,000 thoughts per day. 95% of them are copied verbatim from the day before. 5% are net new. And 80% of them are negative. And that the average human being lies 17 times per day. So if you are lying, when you are lying statistically, you are in the wrong ego state to attract your prospect into a psychological place where you're taking care of them. The second piece I wanted to go into is sins to avoid psychologically. And this is just kind of a high level. Avoid slipping them into the villain role, by saying something like, do you not value your team enough to, give them the talk tracks at work? Avoid building a profile that they don't want to fit into. A great example of this would be if you say, like, we work with VPs of sales who can never hit quota. We work with reps who fail on the phone constantly and can never book a meeting. It might be correct, but you're building a profile that essentially... I would argue that if that's the pitch on the phone, that you can't do anything about it because your elevator pitch is off. So you want to build a profile that people want to fit into. It's certainly not one that they don't. Avoid blaming them for a negative outcome. Avoid highlighting failures of theirs, especially in terms of lagging indicators on what they're metriced on. Psychological no-no. Avoid positioning yourself as the helper and them as the helped. We like to help. We don't like to be helped. Very tough to ask for help. The reason is we aren't the hero. We aren't the person who knows something. We aren't the person who is the authority. So this is why people typically like to give directions, but don't like to ask for them so much. Avoid correcting them, especially if it's not necessary. I hear this all the time in selling where people correct one another. And it's like, unless you absolutely have to, and I go into this in objection handling of how to do it to where your prospect doesn't feel bad. You want to take the blame for why they have the incorrect answer. But if you are correcting anyone in your life, prospecting or not, you are A, in child ego state, but B, you're seeking to undermine, right? So I would not stay away from this, especially if it's not 3,000% necessary that they have updated information. So you see this a lot, within people who, if they feel like they've lost an argument, then they'll try to do it. They'll say something like, like they're getting hammered in terms of their credibility. And they'll be like, there's, spelling miscorrection. Did you mean your instead of your? And A, again, child ego state. But B, if there's no goal of they have to have updated information to move forward, then I would avoid it. There's essentially no point. Avoid positioning yourself as the authority over the prospect. This is a big one, commanding them to do anything, acting like you know more than them, saying that you know more than them, saying something as slight as, I'm more than happy to give you a demo. And again, these are slight. I read them in outreach all the time. And I'm like, well, no shit, you're more than happy to give you a demo. You're trying to sell to me, yes? So like, that's for me to say. I remember one of my buddies had at one point done something a little bit negative to me, kind of let's say grandiose negative. This is years ago. And I remember his friend walking in, and I was at this bar, essentially, and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it, Becc. It's all cool." Mama lost her mind a little bit, okay? So I am very famously known for, in Dallas, that I said to this person, that's for the effed to say to the effer, not the effer to say to the effed. Right? So point being, if you are the one that's incurring the benefit, I would not say something like, I'd be happy to. You are at the receiving end of something, and so I would act accordingly. Sorry for the story, but I'm going to leave it in the recording either way. I'm going to roll the dice. And then number 8, I would avoid positioning yourself as someone who knows more. Just like saying that you're an expert, saying that you're really, really credible, saying that these are the top 10 reasons why you're awesome. Just be awesome. Be credible. Be an expert. And let them, if anyone, say that. So that is their reserved right to think, believe, and certainly to say. So I see a lot of people talking about their credibility, and it's like, just be credible. You either inspire belief or you don't, so I'd focus my calories there, not on saying it. So those are the common psychological sins to avoid. I got 4 more here, and then we can transition to the last question. Avoid talking about about yourself or at all. Avoid talking about, avoid calling out something that they don't know. Avoid associating guilt with them. And then avoid talking negative of others. So I usually say what Sarah says about Sally says much, much more about Sarah than Sally. So I would avoid talking about anyone negatively, but I would highlight and I would desire the chance to talk positively about someone else. So those are the psychological sins. Now I'm going to transition to the third question. So in review, the first question, or the first thing that is important about outreach, is do they read it? Second thing that is important about outreach is psychologically, do you take care of them along the way? And then the third piece is, are you relevant to them once they do read it? So I want to go into all the different items that can cause buyer relevance. There is no one better in the game at this than Keenan from Gap Selling. I would definitely check out his book, but I'm going to go into the types of relevance that you can go into, including some of the relevance that he bridges into in his book. Definitely would pick up a copy of Gap Selling. But these are all the things that you can be relevant to. And in terms of relevance, the difference between that and personalization, again, is relevance is going to be one to many, whereas personalization is one to one only. So relevant to your buyer persona metrics. So there's 3 types of metrics that you have: leading indicators, leaning indicators, and lagging indicators. Not going to go into heavy here, but a lagging indicator essentially is whatever someone is metriced on. Booked meetings, quota attainment, revenue. For an HR professional, it could be NPS score or churn, but it's a lagging indicator of whatever is the metric they are metriced on. A leading indicator is an input that would drive that lagging indicator to change. So, for SDRs, it would be time of day that you send it, who do you send it to, how many email quality, email volume, etc. But they're basically inputs. And then a leading indicator, I don't want anyone to get too complex here or too into this, but a leading indicator is a real-time indicator that's a result of a leading indicator, but it's not the one that you're optimizing for. So the classic example here would be, it's a good indicator that you're on the right or wrong path. So classic example here would be, if the lagging indicator for SDR is booked meetings, the leading indicator is email quality, volume, and the time that they're sending it. A leading indicator, again, is a real-time metric that gives you a status update, but isn't what you're optimizing for. So open rates, reply rates, connection rates would be a great example. But I would know what all of these are, certainly for your buyer. So this is a good graph of, leading and leaning. You can't optimize for in isolation. If I think only about email quality, I sacrifice quantity. And a lagging and leaning indicator have in common that they both depend on a leading indicator, where a leading indicator is just independent. So kind of a crash course. Point being, if I have 6 buyer personas, I need to know what they are metriced on. What do they care about? What's considered a win for them, so I know how to be more relevant to them. The second type of thing that I would be relevant to is your buyer's common problems or challenges. So again, I mentioned his work beforehand, but Keenan is the author of Gap Selling. Wonderful book. I would definitely suggest picking up. And what he understood that no one else has ever understood from my perspective, that I've seen in the market in general, is that the key to winning buyers is to understand what problem they're trying to solve over anything else. Buyers buy according to the problems they're trying to solve, not necessarily just the pains that they're incurring. So he was the first one to understand this. His work was truly groundbreaking. I could not recommend his book more, but he goes into in his book 4 different types of things that people are trying to solve for. So let's dive in here. The first is a technical problem. And a technical problem, simply defined, is a problem with a tool or a process. So my alarm clock is broken, or my SDRs are spending a lot of time, 45 minutes per email, on doing research. So a technical problem is any type of problem with a tool or a process. The second type here is a business problem. So a business problem is just the result of the technical problem. So in this example, my alarm clock's broken, and because of that, the business problem is I've been late to work 6 times over the last month because it's broken. Or my SDRs are spending 45 minutes per email on research. So because of that, they have only been able to send out 10 emails per day, and they've missed their quota for the last 3 months because of it. So it's just the resultant problem from the technical problem. The business impact is essentially why people will buy. So the impact is what happens to this person in specific or this org in specific because of the technical problem and the business problem. So in the first example, my alarm clock is broken. It's a technical problem. The business problem is I've been late to work 6 times because of it. And the business impact is I'm going to be fired if I am late again. Or in the latter example, my SDRs are spending 45 minutes on outreach because of the research that they're doing per email. They've only been able to get out 10 emails per day. They miss their quota because of it and for the last 3 months. And if they miss their quota one more time, I, as a leader, am going to be churned. So business impact is where people are going to really where the reason that they're going to buy. And then a root cause is simply what's causing the technical problem. So maybe 2 wires in the alarm clock are crossed, for instance. And so that's what's making it short. But point being, I would want to know what these are typically for my buyer. So you're going to have a lot of different rotating technical problems and business impacts. Technical problems is usually where sellers are the most comfortable selling, unfortunately, but they don't get into business problem and business impact. Business problem is the ones that I would want to surface for my buyer. So what are the common problems, that my buyers are running into, of like, I'm not booking enough meetings, or my sales cycle is too slow according to my goals, or my ACV is too low for a sales rep. But I would want to know what are the common problems, challenges, business problems, etc., that my buyers are running into so that I get to know their world so I can sell accordingly. The third thing I'd want to know to be relevant to my buyer is what is relevant to them statically. So I go into this, again, relevance is going to be defined as anything that you can segment someone accordingly in a group 1 to many. So if you go into the written hub underneath the asset 6 buckets of personalization, you'll find all of these, the core static relevance. So what I mean by that is what is relevant to them in terms of their cohort, that is non-movement based. So some great examples here: company segment, industry vertical, company, market geos, or tech stack. But this is anything that would affect your buyer that is non-movement based. So here are the only 5, and they're in the 6 buckets of personalization, which is an asset under the written hub on the Flip the Script website. The next thing I would want to be relevant to my buyer based on is what's going on with them in relationship to my company, me or my company. So number of great examples here. Inbound, this would be a trigger or trigger-based relevance to know all of the triggers. If you go under the written hub and download the asset comprehensive encyclopedia of sales plays, these are all the movement-based relevance. So inbound, which is a true hand raiser, I would want to know if they inbounded. So did they request a demo, or did they come in through the chat box? Again, this is going to be someone who became a hand raiser, and that is the trigger. The second type of trigger would be postbound, meaning they took some type of marketing action, but it was non-hand raising what it was. So number of different examples here. They downloaded content, attended an event, attended a webinar, joined one of your a community that you sponsor, for instance. Here's an exhaustive list. But I would want to know all of the things that they have done in relationship to my marketing team that were non-hand raising. And then bridge-bound actions. So bridge-bound actions are actions that they've taken in market, but they're not in relationship to your marketing team. So the ones that would be related to you is number 1, bridge-bound based on history. So they took some type of action. They have some type of pre-existing history with you. So they either demoed in the past and then went dark. They went with a competitor and they're up on renewal. Maybe they requested a demo but didn't schedule one. But they have taken some type of action in the past and they have some type of history. Ross and Rachel we were on a break history with you or someone from your company. Bridge bound based on their likely and market. So there's some kind of action that they've taken that have put them likely into the category of they are in market. So a couple of good examples here are they used to use your competitor, but they churned. They engage with your competitor's company page. They're current customers of an adjacent vendor. So maybe I'm selling outreach and they just received some type of CRM or they received some type of data. So they need a way to segment the emails that they're sending out. But these are all the types of triggers that say that they're likely in market. And then that is all for all of the relevance that you could do based on what's going on with them in relationship to you or your company. The last category, and then we're going to close out, is what's going on with your buyer, not in relationship to you or your company. These are also in the encyclopedia. If you go under the category bridge bound based on symptom, signs, pains, and problems, these are essentially the things that people would do that would trigger to you that they likely have a problem that they're running into, that they've done in market, but they're not aware, they haven't interacted with your company. So I have a number of different pieces here, but a great example would be that they have an output that's negative. So I'll give you an example. I solve for the problem of pipeline, quality and quantity, both. So if I wanted to know a company that was likely running into one of those problems of low, quantity and quality of pipeline, then if I wanted to search all the public companies that missed their quota in Q1. So I don't know if they need sales training, but I would say this is a good place to guess of people who are likely running into those pains and problem. And then the last category here is going to be bridge bound based on firmographic. So this is going to be any kind of action that they took in market that is a trigger based relevance, but it's not in relationship to you or your company. And it's based on a firmographic principle. So companies that went public, raised funding, they were acquired another company, they started hiring, they moved headquarters, etc. But these are jarring to me when people don't know these and they walk in the room with their prospects. Like if you have a discovery meeting with someone and they just IPO'd, you should know that or it'd be helpful to know that. So this will help you answer the last question of, are you relevant to your buyer? So in summary, I know that outreach can be very tough this day and age of how do I stand out? How do I actually make an impact on my buyer? And conversion rates are lower than ever at sub 1% of just response rates, not even conversion into a booked meeting. But there are a number of different options how you can greatly exacerbate those rates into something much more positive. So the three questions that I would ask that are your prospects are answering about any kind of outreach are, do they read it? Do you psychologically take care of them along the way? And are you relevant to them once they read it? So I hope this was helpful to enable you to answer some of those questions, more aggressively within your prospecting outreach from the day to day. So that is everything. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this session, you want to see more just like it, if you go to flipthescript.co, we have a number of different sessions on anything and all things sales and all for free. And if you really like this session and you want to see some tips throughout the week, if you go to Flip the Script on LinkedIn, give us a follow, and we put out about 3 tips per week. But either way, thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.